"Take those cheap clothes out of here," said the single mother millionaire, until she recognized who she was. "Today, you're about to witness a story that will remind you that sometimes our worst prejudices come from our deepest fears, and that the people we judge most harshly might be the ones who mirror our own past struggles. If you're ready for this incredible journey that will challenge everything you think you know about success, dignity, and the masks we wear to hide our pain, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories, and activate those notifications. Let's dive into this extraordinary tale that unfolded in the heart of Beverly Hills, California. The autumn sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sterling Boutique, casting golden light across racks of designer clothing that represented the pinnacle of luxury fashion. Each garment had been carefully selected by Victoria Sterling herself, curated with the discerning eye of someone who understood that wealthy clients didn't just buy clothes, they bought identity, status, and the confidence that came from wearing pieces that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Victoria moved through her flagship store with the practiced grace of someone who had transformed herself from desperate single mother to successful businesswoman through sheer force of will and strategic reinvention. At 38, she possessed the kind of polished elegance that appeared effortless but required constant maintenance. Weekly appointments with personal stylists, monthly procedures with aesthetic specialists, and daily sessions with trainers who came to her Malibu home to ensure her body remained the perfect advertisement for the lifestyle she now represented. Sterling Boutique was more than just a high-end clothing store. It was Victoria's declaration that she had permanently escaped the poverty and uncertainty that had once defined her existence. The boutique occupied prime real estate on Rodeo Drive, employed 12 carefully selected staff members who spoke multiple languages and understood the psychology of luxury retail, and generated annual revenues that had made Victoria one of the most successful female entrepreneurs in Los Angeles. The store itself was a testament to Victoria's aesthetic vision and business acumen. Italian marble floors gleamed under carefully positioned lighting that made every garment appear museum-worthy. Original artwork from emerging contemporary artists covered the walls, creating an atmosphere of sophisticated culture that appealed to clients who viewed shopping as both recreation and cultural experience. Private fitting rooms were equipped with champagne service and personal styling consultations that could last for hours, while clients built wardrobes that reflected their social aspirations and financial capabilities. Victoria's personal office occupied the second floor of the boutique, accessible by a discreet staircase that allowed her to observe the sales floor while maintaining privacy for the business meetings and strategic planning sessions that kept her company competitive in Los Angeles's cutthroat luxury retail market. From her office windows, she could see the constant parade of wealth that characterized Rodeo Drive. Luxury cars delivering clients to exclusive shopping appointments, personal assistants coordinating complicated schedules for people whose time was literally worth hundreds of dollars per hour, and the endless cycle of consumption that kept Beverly Hills's economy thriving. But despite her professional success and financial security, Victoria carried within herself a constant anxiety about maintaining the image she had so carefully constructed. She had learned that in the world of luxury retail, perception was everything, and any crack in her facade of effortless prosperity could undermine the credibility that was essential for attracting and retaining the kind of clients who made her business profitable. Victoria's transformation from struggling single mother to successful entrepreneur had been driven by a trauma that she had never fully processed or resolved. 7 years earlier, she had been Sarah Mitchell, a 29-year-old divorced mother, working 3 jobs to support her 6-year-old daughter Emma while living in a studio apartment in Van Nuys. The divorce from Emma's father had been financially devastating, leaving Sarah with enormous legal debts and a custody arrangement that provided minimal child support from a man who seemed more interested in his new life than maintaining connections with his previous one. Sarah had discovered fashion during those desperate months, initially as a necessity rather than passion. She had learned to shop at thrift stores and consignment shops, developing an eye for quality pieces that could be mixed and matched to create the appearance of a more extensive wardrobe. Her natural sense of style and ability to find designer items at discount prices had attracted the attention of other struggling mothers, who began asking for advice about stretching their clothing budgets. What started as informal assistance for friends had gradually evolved into a small business. Sarah had begun charging modest fees for personal shopping services, helping working mothers find professional attire that would allow them to compete for better jobs. Her reputation had grown through word-of-mouth recommendations, and within 2 years she was earning enough from styling services to quit 2 of her 3 jobs. The transition from personal stylist to boutique owner had been enabled by a combination of business loans, investor partnerships, and the kind of calculated risks that separated successful entrepreneurs from people who remained trapped in cycles of financial struggle. Sarah had recognized that Los Angeles's luxury market was underserved by retailers who truly understood their clients' psychological needs, and she had positioned Sterling Boutique as a solution to that gap. But the transformation from Sarah to Victoria had required more than just business success. It had required Sarah to suppress parts of her personality and history that she believed were incompatible with the image her wealthy clients expected from their personal stylist and boutique owner. Victoria Sterling was confident, sophisticated, and completely removed from the financial struggles that had once defined Sarah Mitchell's existence. The process had been painful but necessary. Victoria had legally changed her name, created a fictional background that emphasized her education and travels rather than her struggles with poverty, and systematically eliminated people from her life who might remind her clients that she had once been someone very different. Even Emma, now 13, had been enrolled in an expensive private school where she learned to present herself as someone who had always lived with privilege and security. Victoria had convinced herself that this reinvention was not just personally necessary, but professionally essential. Her clients paid premium prices, partly because they believed they were accessing someone who naturally belonged to their social stratum. If they discovered that Victoria had once been a struggling single mother who shopped at thrift stores, they might question whether she truly understood their needs and aesthetic preferences. The morning that would challenge everything Victoria had become started like any other Tuesday in her carefully orchestrated routine. She arrived at Sterling Boutique at 8 a.m., 2 hours before the store opened to clients, using the quiet time to review inventory reports, plan promotional strategies, and ensure that every aspect of her business was operating at the level of perfection her reputation demanded. Victoria's morning routine included reviewing appointment schedules for her highest-value clients, women who spent thousands of dollars per visit and expected personalized attention that justified Sterling Boutique's premium pricing structure. Today's schedule included appointments with a tech executive's wife who was building a wardrobe for charity galas, a real estate heiress who needed outfits for a month-long European vacation, and a surgeon's spouse who was preparing for her husband's medical conference in New York. At 10:15, 15 minutes after the boutique opened for business, Victoria was reviewing fabric samples for a custom dress order when her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom system, connecting her office to the sales floor. "Ms. Sterling." Jessica's voice carried a note of concern that immediately attracted Victoria's attention. "There's a situation developing on the sales floor that I think you should be aware of." Victoria looked up from the silk swatches she had been evaluating, her expression shifting to the alert focus she brought to any potential disruption of her store's carefully controlled atmosphere. "What kind of situation?" "There's a woman browsing in the casual wear section who..." Jessica paused, clearly struggling to find appropriate words. Who doesn't appear to fit our typical client demographic? She's been here for about 20 minutes, and some of our regular clients have seemed uncomfortable. Victoria felt a familiar surge of anxiety. Sterling Boutique's success depended on maintaining an exclusive atmosphere that made wealthy clients feel they were shopping in a space designed specifically for people of their social and economic status. The presence of someone who clearly didn't belong could damage the boutique's reputation and potentially drive away the kind of customers who generated the majority of Victoria's revenue. Is she causing problems, disturbing other clients? Victoria asked, already moving toward her office windows to observe the sales floor below. Not exactly, Jessica replied. She's been very quiet, very respectful, but her clothing is obviously inexpensive, and she keeps looking at price tags with the kind of expression that suggests she's shocked by our pricing structure. Victoria positioned herself at her office window where she could observe the sales floor without being obvious about her surveillance. She immediately spotted the woman Jessica had described, someone who appeared to be in her early 30s, wearing a faded sweater and jeans that had clearly been purchased at discount retailers rather than designer boutiques. The woman was examining a cashmere cardigan with the careful attention of someone who understood fabric quality, but was clearly struggling with the sticker shock of luxury pricing. Her posture suggested someone who was accustomed to making careful spending decisions, someone for whom a single garment from Sterling Boutique represented a significant financial investment rather than an impulse purchase. Victoria felt a complex mixture of irritation and recognition as she watched the woman. The irritation came from her concern about how this customer's presence might affect her store's atmosphere and her regular clients' comfort levels. But the recognition came from somewhere deeper and more painful. The woman reminded Victoria of herself 7 years earlier, when she had been Sarah Mitchell, desperately trying to find affordable professional clothes that could help her compete for better employment opportunities. "I'll handle this personally," Victoria told Jessica, her voice carrying the authoritative tone she used when addressing situations that required immediate resolution. Victoria descended the stairs to the sales floor with the confident stride she had perfected for interactions with clients who expected to be impressed by her presence. She had learned that in luxury retail, the store owner's personal attention could either elevate a customer's experience or efficiently resolve problems that might otherwise escalate into more serious disruptions. As Victoria approached the woman examining the cashmere cardigan, she caught fragments of a quiet conversation the customer was having with herself, calculations about price per wear, comparisons to similar items she had seen at other stores, the kind of internal debate that Victoria remembered having during her own years of financial struggle. "Excuse me," Victoria said, her voice carrying the polished tone she used for addressing situations that required diplomatic but firm resolution. "Can I help you find something specific?" The woman looked up from the cardigan, and Victoria felt a shock of recognition that went far beyond the general similarity she had noticed from her office window. The woman's eyes were familiar in a way that made Victoria's chest tighten, with an emotion she couldn't immediately identify. "Oh, I'm just browsing," the woman replied, her voice carrying a slight accent that Victoria recognized but couldn't place. "This is a beautiful store, and the quality of everything is obviously exceptional." Victoria studied the woman's face more carefully, searching for the source of her sense of familiarity, while simultaneously evaluating how to handle this situation in a way that would protect her store's atmosphere without creating an unpleasant scene that might attract unwanted attention from other customers. "I appreciate that," Victoria said, "but I have to be honest with you. Our price points are quite high, and our typical customers are shopping for investment pieces rather than casual purchases. You might find better value at stores that specialize in more accessible pricing." The suggestion was delivered with the kind of diplomatic phrasing Victoria had perfected for steering inappropriate customers toward other retail options. But the woman's reaction was not what Victoria had expected. Instead of accepting the hint and leaving gracefully, the woman continued studying the cardigan while responding with quiet dignity. "I understand that your prices reflect quality and exclusivity," the woman said. "I'm not shopping casually. I'm looking for something specific for a job interview, something that will help me make the right impression." Victoria felt another wave of uncomfortable recognition. The woman's situation, needing professional clothing for job interviews, struggling with the investment required for garments that could make the difference between employment and continued financial uncertainty, was exactly the scenario Victoria had faced repeatedly during her own transition from struggling single mother to successful entrepreneur. But Victoria's response was shaped more by her anxiety about protecting her store's image than by any empathy for the woman's situation. "I'm sure you understand that our pieces are quite expensive," Victoria said, her tone becoming more pointed. "The cardigan you're looking at retails for $800. The woman's expression didn't change, but Victoria saw her carefully return the cardigan to its display. "I understand. Thank you for your time." Victoria should have felt satisfied that she had successfully managed the situation without creating a scene or allowing an inappropriate customer to disrupt her store's atmosphere. But instead, she felt compelled to continue the interaction, driven by emotions she didn't fully understand. "Look," Victoria said, her voice taking on an edge that surprised even her. "I don't mean to be rude, but this really isn't the right store for someone in your situation. You'd probably be more comfortable shopping somewhere that carries more affordable options." The woman turned to face Victoria directly, and in that moment, Victoria saw something in her expression that made her stomach drop with recognition and growing horror. "My situation," the woman repeated quietly. "And what exactly do you think my situation is?" Victoria felt herself crossing a line she had never intended to approach, but she was unable to stop herself. The presence of this woman in her store had triggered anxieties and memories she had worked hard to suppress, and her response was coming from a place of fear rather than rational business judgment. "I think you're someone who's struggling financially, who's probably shopping here, hoping to find something you can afford, not understanding that our prices are set for clients who don't have to worry about cost," Victoria said, her voice rising slightly. "I think you're exactly the kind of customer who makes my regular clients uncomfortable." The words were cruel and completely inappropriate for any retail interaction, but Victoria found herself unable to stop. "Take those cheap clothes and that desperate energy somewhere else. This store is for people who belong here, not for people who are pretending they can afford something they clearly can't." The silence that followed Victoria's outburst was deafening. Every person on the sales floor, customers, staff members, even passing pedestrians visible through the store's windows, seemed to have frozen in place, as if Victoria's words had created a pause in time itself. The woman stood completely still, her face showing a mixture of shock, hurt, and something else that Victoria couldn't identify. But then, slowly, recognition began to dawn in her expression, and Victoria realized with growing horror that the woman was recognizing her as well. "Victoria Sterling," the woman said quietly, her voice carrying no anger but a sadness that was somehow worse than any accusation could have been. "Or should I say, Sarah Mitchell?" Victoria felt the blood drain from her face as the woman's identity finally crystallized in her memory. Standing in front of her, wearing the discount clothing Victoria had just mocked, was Maria Santos, the woman who had literally saved Victoria's life 7 years earlier, when Victoria had been Sarah Mitchell, desperate and on the verge of losing everything. Maria Santos had been Victoria's neighbor during her darkest period, living in the apartment next door to the cramped studio where Sarah and Emma had struggled to survive on the income from 3 minimum-wage jobs. Maria had been a single mother herself, working as a seamstress while raising her twin daughters, but she had possessed a generosity of spirit that had made her the unofficial support system for several struggling families in their apartment complex. When Sarah's car had broken down, leaving her unable to get to her cleaning job, Maria had offered rides without being asked. When Emma had gotten sick and Sarah couldn't afford to miss work for a doctor's visit, Maria had watched Emma for free and shared her own family's traditional remedies that had helped the child recover. When Sarah had been short on rent money and facing eviction, Maria had quietly slipped cash under her door, money she had saved from her own meager earnings. Most importantly, Maria had been the one to suggest that Sarah consider using her natural fashion sense as a source of income. Maria had been the first person to pay Sarah for styling advice, and she had recommended Sarah's services to other women in their community who were also struggling to build professional wardrobes on limited budgets. Maria Santos had literally made Victoria Sterling's success possible through her kindness, support, and belief in Sarah Mitchell's potential during a period when Sarah had barely believed in herself. And now, 7 years later, Victoria had just told this woman to take her cheap clothes and leave, not recognizing the person who had been instrumental in creating the success that had made Victoria's cruelty possible. "Maria," Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the boutique. Maria nodded slowly, her expression carrying a sadness that was more devastating than any anger would have been. "Hello, Sarah. I've been wondering what happened to you and Emma after you moved away so suddenly." Victoria felt her carefully constructed world collapsing around her like a house of cards in an earthquake. Every assumption she had made about her transformation, every justification she had created for her behavior, every wall she had built between Sarah Mitchell and Victoria Sterling, was crumbling in the face of Maria's quiet dignity. I didn't recognize you," Victoria stammered, knowing even as she spoke that the words were both true and completely inadequate as an explanation for her behavior. Maria smiled sadly. "I recognized you immediately, even with all the changes. But I didn't recognize who you've become." The judgment in Maria's words was gentle but unmistakable, and Victoria felt it like a physical blow. She became aware that every person in her store was watching this interaction, including regular clients who were seeing their sophisticated boutique owner reduced to stammering embarrassment by a woman in discount clothing. "Maria, I'm sorry," Victoria said, her voice shaking with emotions she had suppressed for years. "I didn't mean. I wouldn't have said those things if I had recognized you." Maria's expression didn't soften. "Would you have said them to someone else? Someone who hadn't helped you when you needed it most?" The question hung in the air like an accusation that Victoria couldn't answer honestly without admitting truths about herself that she had been avoiding for years. The silence stretched until Maria stepped closer, lowering her voice so their conversation wouldn't be overheard by the growing crowd of curious observers. "Sarah, what happened to you?" Maria asked quietly. "You used to understand what it felt like to struggle, to feel judged by people who had more than you did. You used to care about people who were facing the same challenges you had overcome." Victoria looked around her boutique, at the expensive clothes, the luxury fixtures, the wealthy clients who were watching this interaction with the kind of fascination people reserved for witnessing someone else's public humiliation. She realized that in becoming Victoria Sterling, she had not just changed her name and circumstances, she had fundamentally altered her character in ways that made her unrecognizable to someone who had known and loved Sarah Mitchell. "I built all this," Victoria said weakly, gesturing at the boutique around them. "I created a successful business. I provided security for Emma. I made something of myself." Maria nodded. "You did build something impressive. But Sarah, what did you have to destroy about yourself to build it?" The question was delivered without malice, but it penetrated Victoria's defenses like a knife through silk. She realized that in her desperation to escape the vulnerability and fear that had characterized her life as Sarah Mitchell, She had eliminated not just her struggles, but also her empathy, her connection to her community, and her understanding of what it meant to lift others up rather than pushing them down. "I was trying to protect what I had built," Victoria said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. I thought if people knew where I came from, they wouldn't respect what I had achieved." Maria's expression softened slightly. "And now? Do you think the people watching us right now respect what you've achieved?" Victoria looked around the boutique again, seeing her staff members' shocked expressions, her clients' uncomfortable fascination, and the general atmosphere of tension that her outburst had created. She realized that in trying to protect her reputation, she had probably done more damage to it in 5 minutes than any revelation about her background could have caused. "Maria," Victoria said, her voice breaking, "why are you here? What were you really shopping for?" Maria reached into her purse and pulled out a business card that made Victoria's heart skip a beat. The card identified Maria as the owner of Santos Community Services, a non-profit organization that provided job training and professional development for low-income women in Los Angeles. "I've been running this program for 3 years," Maria explained. "We help women transition from welfare to work, and part of our service includes helping them build professional wardrobes for job interviews and workplace success. I came to your store because I heard it was owned by someone who understood both fashion and the challenges facing women who need to make good impressions on limited budgets." Victoria stared at the business card, understanding flooding through her like ice water. Maria had come to Sterling Boutique not as a struggling individual looking for charity, but as a successful non-profit director hoping to establish a business relationship that could benefit the women her organization served. "I thought," Maria continued, "that maybe the person who had once been Sarah Mitchell might be interested in partnering with an organization that helps women in situations similar to the one you faced 7 years ago." Victoria felt as if the floor had opened beneath her feet. Maria had not only recognized her despite all her changes, but had also remembered her struggles and believed that Sarah's experiences might have created empathy that could be channeled into helping others. Instead, Victoria had demonstrated that Sarah Mitchell's struggles had been erased along with her name. "I need to make this right," Victoria said suddenly, her voice carrying a determination that surprised both women. Victoria turned to address the crowd that had gathered to watch their interaction, her voice clear and strong, despite the tears streaming down her face. "Ladies and gentlemen, I owe everyone here an apology, but especially I owe an apology to Maria Santos." The boutique fell silent as Victoria continued speaking, her words carrying the kind of raw honesty that was rarely heard in the polished atmosphere of luxury retail. 7 years ago, I was a struggling single mother named Sarah Mitchell. I worked 3 jobs, lived in a studio apartment, and shopped at thrift stores because I couldn't afford anything else. I was facing eviction, couldn't afford car repairs, and was constantly worried about providing for my daughter. Victoria gestured toward Maria, who was listening with an expression of surprise and growing respect. Maria Santos was my neighbor during that time, and she literally saved my life. She gave me rides when my car broke down, watched my daughter when she was sick, helped me with rent when I was short on money, and encouraged me to use my interest in fashion to create income opportunities. The confession was creating exactly the kind of scene Victoria had spent years trying to avoid, but she found that she no longer cared about maintaining the image that had required her to become someone she didn't recognize. "I built this business partly because of Maria's support and encouragement, and just now, when she came to my store as a successful non-profit director hoping to discuss a potential partnership, I treated her like an unwelcome intruder because I was afraid her presence might damage the image I've been trying to maintain." Victoria turned back to face Maria directly. "Maria, I am deeply sorry for my behavior. You deserved kindness and respect, not judgment and cruelty." And you especially didn't deserve that treatment from someone whose success was made possible by your generosity." Maria's eyes were filled with tears, but her expression had softened into something that might have been forgiveness, mixed with sadness for what Victoria had become in her pursuit of success. "Sarah," Maria said quietly, "I didn't come here to embarrass you or to remind you of the past. I came because I hoped that your experiences might have given you insights that could help other women facing similar challenges." Victoria wiped tears from her cheeks, smearing her carefully applied makeup, but no longer caring about maintaining the perfect appearance that had become more important to her than maintaining her character. "They did give me insights," Victoria said, "but somewhere along the way, I forgot them. I forgot what it felt like to be judged for my clothes, to be dismissed because of my circumstances, to be treated like I didn't belong in spaces where I needed to be taken seriously." Victoria looked around her boutique, seeing it with new eyes, as a space that might intimidate and exclude women who needed professional clothing but couldn't afford luxury prices. Women who were exactly like she had been 7 years earlier. "Maria," Victoria said, "would you be willing to give me another chance? Not just to apologize, but to find ways that Sterling Boutique could actually serve the women your organization helps?" Maria studied Victoria's face, searching for signs of sincerity beyond the emotional display that might have been motivated more by embarrassment than genuine remorse. "What did you have in mind?" Maria asked cautiously. Victoria felt ideas forming in her mind, possibilities she had never considered because she had been too focused on maintaining exclusivity rather than expanding accessibility. What if Sterling Boutique created a program that provided professional wardrobe consultations and clothing for women transitioning into the workforce? Victoria suggested. "We could set aside certain hours each week for appointments that focus on building professional wardrobes within realistic budgets, and we could partner with manufacturers to create a line of professional clothing that offers quality and style at accessible price points." Maria's expression began to show interest rather than skepticism. "You would be willing to do that?" "More than willing," Victoria replied. "I would be honored to do that. But Maria, I would need your help. I've spent so many years trying to forget what it was like to struggle financially that I've lost touch with what women in those situations actually need." Victoria paused, looking around at her staff and clients who were still listening to every word of this unprecedented conversation. "I want to create something that honors both the success I've achieved and the struggles that made that success possible," Victoria continued. "I want Sterling Boutique to be a place where women can find not just beautiful clothes, but also the confidence and support they need to believe in their own potential." Maria smiled for the first time since entering the boutique. "That sounds like something Sarah Mitchell would have wanted to create." Victoria felt something inside her chest loosen and lighten, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had suddenly been lifted. Maybe it's time for Victoria Sterling to remember some of the things Sarah Mitchell understood about what really matters. Over the following months, Sterling Boutique underwent a transformation that reflected Victoria's renewed commitment to the values she had abandoned in her pursuit of exclusive success. Working with Maria's non-profit organization, Victoria created the Second Chances program that provided professional wardrobe consultations and clothing assistance for women entering the workforce. The program operated during specific hours when the boutique's atmosphere was adjusted to be more welcoming and accessible. Victoria trained her staff to provide styling services that focused on maximizing impact within realistic budgets, and she partnered with ethical manufacturers to create a line of professional clothing that offered quality construction and sophisticated design at prices that working women could afford. Victoria also reconnected with the community of women who had supported each other during their struggles, discovering that many of them had achieved their own versions of success and were eager to help other women navigate similar challenges. The boutique became a gathering place for women at various stages of their professional and personal development, creating the kind of supportive community that had been missing from Victoria's life since she had become successful enough to distance herself from her origins. Most importantly, Victoria began introducing her daughter Emma to the full truth about their family's history and the women who had helped them survive and thrive during their most difficult period. Emma, now 14, was initially embarrassed by the revelation that their wealth was relatively recent and that her mother had once struggled with poverty. But as Emma began volunteering with the Second Chances program and meeting women whose stories reminded her of her mother's journey, she developed a deeper understanding of strength, resilience, and the importance of using success to create opportunities for others rather than to exclude them. "Mom," Emma said one afternoon as they were working together to organize clothing donations for the program, "I'm proud of what you built with the boutique, but I'm even more proud of who you're becoming now that you remember who you used to be." Victoria looked at her daughter, seeing in Emma's expression the kind of wisdom and compassion that Victoria had almost lost in her pursuit of success without substance. "I'm proud of who you're becoming too," Victoria replied. "And I'm grateful that Maria reminded me that success without empathy isn't really success at all." 6 months after their confrontation in Sterling Boutique, Victoria and Maria stood together at the graduation ceremony for the first group of women who had completed the Second Chances program. 12 women who had been unemployed or underemployed 6 months earlier were now dressed in professional attire they had selected and styled with help from Victoria's program, and all of them had secured positions that provided living wages and opportunities for advancement. "This is what I always hoped you would create," Maria told Victoria as they watched the graduates celebrate with their families. "Not just a successful business, but a successful business that remembers where it came from and uses that memory to help others." Victoria hugged Maria, feeling gratitude not just for her friend's support during her struggling years, but also for her willingness to confront Victoria when she had forgotten the lessons those struggles had taught her. "Thank you for not giving up on Sarah Mitchell," Victoria said, "even when Victoria Sterling was trying so hard to make her disappear." Maria smiled. Sarah Mitchell created something beautiful when she became Victoria Sterling. She just needed to remember that the best parts of who she used to be were worth preserving and sharing, not hiding and forgetting. The single mother millionaire who had once told a woman in cheap clothes to leave her store had learned that the most expensive thing she had ever worn was the mask she had created to hide from her own past. And in taking off that mask, she had discovered that her true success lay not in the distance she had traveled from her struggles, but in her ability to use those struggles to lift others up instead of pushing them down.